I got a question about number 5 from chapter 12, but to talk about number 5, I first need to talk about number 2, and it's a useful review as well. So the number 2 is reproduced here. Draw this diagram, private market outcome, then show the best social outcome given the positive externality, and then talk about the possibility of gains from trade through bargaining. That's 2. And 5 asks us to think about why they might not be able to bargain successfully. It's actually hard because I know they do bargain successfully, but it will throw some stuff out there. But the main thing I want to do is do the welfare analysis of the government subsidy, and then talk about that. Compare that to the outcome of bargaining. So let's go. I've got a new blank canvas here. Let's just get started. What we want to do first is just graph the private market outcome, and we'll do that in black. So there's this. We're going to look at. We're actually not looking at a market. We're looking at a, beekeeper's problem, a single beekeeper's problem. And so the quantity axis is the quantity of honey. We'll measure it in kilos per year. And the y-axis is the price, dollars per kilo, and realize that those are the same units as marginal cost, marginal benefit, and I'll just label it price though. We're going to assume that there's, in the short run, an upward sloping marginal cost curve. That'll be the marginal private cost. We won't we'll assume there's no negative externalities, no workers are getting stung somewhere, there's no negative externalities. So the marginal social cost function is just equal to the marginal private cost function. All right. The beekeeper gets the market price. If honey sells for P0 dollars per kilo, the farmer will keep producing as long as the price of a kilo is greater than the marginal cost of bringing that kilo to market. This is the marginal private benefit function, and we know from having done this many times in class that the farmer, or the beekeeper, is going to produce Q0 worth of honey. Now let's think about introducing the externality of the pollination of the farmer's fields. Let's assume that every bee flying out there, every kilo of honey produces the same positive benefit to the farmers. In that case, the marginal social benefit function is going to be higher than the marginal private benefit function by this amount, the marginal external benefit. In that case, from society's point of view, we would want every honey produced where the social benefit, marginal social benefit, is greater than the marginal social cost. And the socially best outcome would be at this level of output Q star. That brings me up through A and B of number 2. And then to talk about how the farmer and the beekeeper might be made better off through bargaining, let's just consider this extra positive external benefit that's going to happen if output is increased from Q0 to Q star. Notice that with that increase in output, farmers gain this rectangle here, the areas A, B combined, because there's that much extra pollination. All right, but also notice that if the market price is P0 and farmers produced at Q star, notice that first kilo of honey over Q star, their costs would have outweighed their benefits by this vertical distance. And if we add up the excess of private costs over private benefit, we get this area B. So the farmer would lose B the beekeeper would lose B if they weren't compensated for that extra production. But if the beekeeper could get compensated for area B, the beekeeper would be perfectly happy to produce at Q star. So we have this case where farmers are willing to pay area AB to get the beekeeper to keep more bees, produce more honey, and we've got the beekeeper willing to do so. If they could get area B, we have room for a mutually beneficial trade. So that would be the case if they could bargain. Now 5 asks us to take this a little further. I see that I left myself short of room. Let's see if I can shrink this. I can move it. Can I shrink it? Oh, I can shrink it. Yay. You'll see why I wanted to do that in a moment. All right, so 5 asks us to consider the beekeeper and the neighboring farmer in exercise 12.3. That was the exercise 2 in the study packet, actually. Why might they be unable to bargain successfully to achieve a Pareto efficient outcome in practice? And in fact, they do bargain, and there's a market for beekeepers. They get paid plenty of money to put their bee boxes on particular farmers' property. Back in the day, they didn't used to. What kept them from bargaining? Maybe some ignorance about the benefits of the bees, cultural difference between the farmers and the beekeepers. Farmers tend to be, I don't know, in my experience, they were pretty straight-laced out in the Central Valley in California, where the beekeepers tend to be more hippie-ish. So there might not be a natural affinity that might get in the way of bargaining. Hard for me to think about why they couldn't bargain, because they do bargain all the time, and this isn't really an externality problem that needs government to solve. But let's say if it were, like say the vaccination problem, there's so many diffuse benefits, and it would be impossible to write a contract that would require would enable compensation of the person being vaccinated by all the people that didn't get sick as a result, or whose probability of getting sick was reduced. So that's a case where government intervention makes a lot more sense. But let's just suppose that this was a case where, the bargaining solution isn't possible. There's a lot of situations like this, but just honey and beekeeping isn't really one of them in my experience. But let's go forward as though it were. So government subsidy. If the government subsidized a Pigouvian I just did something funky with with my recording. Hopefully this is still recording. A government subsidy would be a subsidy to the beekeepers of size S. So they'd produce a kilo of honey to market, and the government would give them amount S. And in that case, the marginal private benefit plus S would be the benefit of producing 1 more kilo of honey, and so the social benefit of doing so would be the same as the private benefit, and that would bring the market, the individual honey producers, to produce Q star worth of honey. So that's what a subsidy would do. Let's think about the distributional effects here, and I'm going to label this area C. And we have 3 entities. We don't have consumers of honey mapped here, and let's just assume that they're not affected for the time being. We have producer surplus. The beekeeper is affected by this policy. We're going to talk about the externality. That's changed by this policy. And then we have government revenue, which is changed by this externality. And then let's total this up. And then let's just look at changes. Producer surplus, we notice that if beekeepers get the extra amount S per kilo of honey, their benefits their producer surplus goes up by areas CA. You see where that's coming from, that they now get this amount, and remember their producer surplus is the area below the price received above the marginal costs. They were getting this before, but their producer surplus has grown by areas CA with this policy. The externality, we notice the positive externality has increased by areas A, B, C. All of those I misspoke actually. The externality increases by area AB, right? The farmers were getting area C already. Gotta change that a little bit. Sorry, that C doesn't belong in there. All right. Now, how about government revenue? Government revenue is a little tricky, but realize to pay a subsidy, the government's got to collect taxes. So this is the ABC I was thinking about. The government's got to collect taxes equal to the amount S for every kilo of honey produced, and that's area ABC. So somewhere else in the economy, people got taxed to fund this subsidy. And that shows up as a negative because those people won't have those resources to do other things with. And let's calculate the total, and I'll change my color here. To get the total of the changes, we can just total these up. And let's notice we've got negative A here and positive A. We've got positive C and negative C. We've got positive B. That cancels out with negative B. And we see that the subsidy increases aggregate well-being by area A. And that was what was deadweight loss before. Now it's it's the increase in well-being because that happens because of that subsidy. Now, they want us to compare this outcome to the Pareto efficient bargaining outcome, and this is efficient. The net gain is positive A, just like in the bargaining outcome. But now we've had to tax people outside this market, and maybe honey prices drop and they get compensated through that. Maybe they buy food, and the crops that are better pollinated are cheaper too. But the fact is, we've involved government and bureaucrats and monitoring a program and people outside this direct market that are involved. And that's, if we could do it through bargaining, assign property rights clearly, and negotiation costs are, if we can bargain, it means that negotiation costs are sufficiently low. That's always, can I say this? I think that's always better because you're not involving taxpayers that may not eat honey, although everybody does eat food, the food crops that are harvested. Still, it's the bargaining outcome doesn't involve these other parties in the solution, the other parties being the taxpayers in particular. So there it is.